You're only good for caregiving. Despite completely giving up on being a woman. My husband says this, not only pushing the care of his mother onto me, his wife, but also hurling such insults. And there, smirking beside him, is my mother-in-law. Thank you both for cutting the last thread of my patience. I'm Susan, a 55-year-old housewife. I have 2 children, but they are already independent. I was living an ordinary life with my 59-year-old husband Bob. Until he suddenly said we should live with his mother. His mother had been living in his family home, about an hour's drive from our house, with Bob's sister and her husband. Then his mother-in-law fell down a flight of stairs and hit her back, leaving her in need of a wheelchair. After she was discharged from the hospital, we asked Bob's sister and her husband to take care of her. However, within a month, my sister-in-law suddenly said, "Actually, I've been planning to move to my husband's family home for a while. Sorry. But you'll have to take care of her from now on," and quickly started preparing to move. It seems she got fed up with caregiving in just a few weeks. I was stunned when Bob told me this, but what shocked me more was what he said next. "As soon as my sister and her husband move out, we'll move into the family home." What? When was this decided? I haven't heard a word about this from you. What about our house here? All these thoughts rushed to my mind, but Bob said, "It's fine. My mother is kind, and since she can move in a wheelchair, we can just rent or sell this house. My sister and I have already agreed that I will inherit the family home. Just because she can move in a wheelchair doesn't mean she doesn't need it. Even going to the bathroom is a challenge," I desperately explained. But Bob just said, "We'll manage somehow. I'll help if it comes to that." If it comes to that? So, you're basically leaving it all to me? I was angry and overwhelmed with anxiety. But I couldn't just leave my wheelchair-bound mother-in-law alone, so I reluctantly agreed to live with her. The first 1 or 2 months of living together went by without major issues. Of course, there were many mistakes as we were all adjusting. But my mother-in-law tried her best to do things on her own and often expressed her gratitude and apologies, which lightened my heart. However, it must have been a great stress for her not being able to move her body as she wanted. After falling from her wheelchair and injuring her back even more, her personality started to change. One moment she would say, "Could you clean my room a bit more thoroughly?" And the next she'd scream, "Oh, enough. The sound of the vacuum is so loud. Get out of my room right now." Then she would tell my husband, "Susan seems to hate taking care of me so much. She's always trying to upset me." Hearing this, Bob would scold me, "Don't you have any respect for your husband's mother? You're living in this house for free. So show some gratitude and take care of her properly." It's the same cycle over and over. Additionally, my mother-in-law complained to my sister-in-law, leading to more complaints coming my way, leaving me utterly drained. Feeling physically and mentally at my limit, I thought of getting a helper. My mother-in-law was eligible for home care services, but she had never used them because she didn't want to be cared for by strangers. However, I could no longer prioritize her wishes over my own well-being. I decided to hire a helper at my own expense. But this turned out to be a huge mistake. The helper was very kind, but my mother-in-law lashed out at her, saying things like, "Don't enter my room. Who knows what you'll steal, and you're going in and out of different houses, aren't you? I don't want someone as filthy as you touching me." She insulted the helper and disrespected her dignity. The contract was terminated within a month. Furthermore, Bob was furious that I had hired the helper without his consent. "You just want to slack off," he accused. Instead of spending money on that, buy better food for my mother, he scolded me. "But I can't take it anymore. The caregiving alone is hard enough, and your mother is so harsh on me." I pleaded with tears. However, he yelled back, "What lies are you telling? My mother would never say such things. You really have a twisted mind." In the end, I was left to care for her alone again. At that point, I made a decision. I was determined to show Bob just how difficult caregiving is. First, I asked him to help with moving his mother in and out of her wheelchair. But while my mother-in-law deliberately leaned all her weight on me when I assisted her, making it hard for me to move her, she supported herself as much as possible when Bob helped her. She said, "Bob is so kind. He's nothing like his wife." making me out to be the villain. Caring for her is not hard at all. Stop acting like a tragic heroine, Bob said to me, and that's when I lost it. I threw my mother-in-law's discarded underwear at Bob. Yuck. What is this? It stinks. It's your mother's dirty underwear. It stinks this much. I've been hand washing these every day. Why don't you try washing them once, Bob? I yelled this, and Bob was momentarily lost for words, then retorted, "There's a washing machine, isn't there? Fine, wash them directly in the machine. But I think the smell and stains might transfer to other clothes, and germs might stick too. Starting tomorrow, I'll wash all your clothes with your mother's dirty underwear. That's okay, right?" After saying that, Bob had no comeback. The next day, true to my word, I washed his favorite shirt with his mother's dirty underwear. When Bob saw the shirt, which had a slight odor and color, he immediately bought a portable washing machine. "I can't afford to buy this much myself," he said gruffly. I was infuriated that he didn't apologize, but felt slightly relieved. However, my mother-in-law's attitude towards me only worsened. She had been neglecting her rehabilitation and mostly bedridden now. To prevent bed sores, I frequently had to move her. Originally overweight, she had gained over 70 kilograms since becoming bedridden, making it a heavy task for me alone. Recently, I nearly dropped her on the other side of the bed because I couldn't apply strength properly. Then she screamed, "You're trying to send me to the other world for the inheritance. Unfortunately for you, you won't get a penny." Infuriated by her words, I smiled sweetly at her. "So, caring for you means I'm just losing out. Maybe I should stop then." She looked shocked and said, "How dare you say that as a daughter-in-law?" "Well, I've been thinking about stopping being that a daughter-in-law too," I retorted. She turned pale and shrieked, "Get out! Get out of this room." She probably intended to call Bob. Sure enough, within 2 hours, Bob came home early from work. "You said you want to divorce me because you hate caring for my mother?" "That's right, I'm considering it." Bob then looked at me with a condescending gaze. "What are you going to do after the divorce? You can't possibly get a job now. Planning to catch another man? Impossible, impossible." Next to me, my mother-in-law was smirking. "I'm not thinking about that." "But what do you mean by impossible? You're over 50. Have you looked in the mirror lately? You've completely given up on being a woman. With your unkempt hair and bare face full of wrinkles and spots, do you think any man would be interested in you? You're only good for caregiving." He scoffed. But I didn't back down and retorted, "Who do you think buys your shampoo, hair products, and hair growth treatments? Who irons your shirts and takes your suits to the cleaners? Without me, you'd be told you've given up on being a man." Bob turned bright red at my words and ran off to his room. Then he started calling someone. Probably to his sister for backup. As I expected, 15 minutes later, my sister-in-law called. "What's this about you treating mom terribly and wanting a divorce?" "What are you thinking? I'm considering a divorce," I responded in a deliberately calm tone. "Don't joke. Who's going to take care of mom?" "Well, maybe Bob or you." "That's ridiculous. I'm already taking care of my husband's parents. There's no need for you to do that. It's not your obligation." I explained that caring for parents is the responsibility of their blood relatives, and she doesn't have to care for her husband's parents. That's not how it works. It's common sense. Common sense, huh? By the way, your mother accused me that I'm here for her inheritance. Is there even any inheritance from your father? What? Why bring that up all of a sudden? Just wondering if there's really something to worry about after she passes away. Huh? What do you mean? Bob and I will split it. Unfortunately for you, you have no claim. Her voice sounded spiteful. That's fine for me, but what about it? What do you mean? Growing impatient, I whispered to her. I'm just worried that Bob might try to cozy up to your mother to get all the inheritance for himself. What? He's been talking a lot with her lately. Maybe he's trying to get her to leave everything to him in her will. In reality, my mother-in-law and Bob were indeed whispering together about the inheritance. So what I suggested to my sister-in-law might not have been far from the truth. It seemed to strike a chord with her, as she fell silent. Seizing the moment, I pressed on. If you're worried about what I just mentioned, it might be best to come back as soon as possible to take care of your mother. She's bedridden lately, and you never know what might happen. After saying that, I hung up the phone and started packing my basic belongings into my suitcase. The next morning, after Bob went to work, I left a note on the table and left my in-laws' house. As expected, my sister-in-law rushed back to the house that same day, declaring that she would take over the care of my mother-in-law. She even seemed to have divorced her husband, possibly due to his modest income. Bob, initially thrilled that someone was taking over. He agreed to divorce, so I promptly contacted lawyer for official procedures. For alimony and division of property, I ensured everything was properly handled through a lawyer. After that, Bob seems to have learned that his sister-in-law came home to get an inheritance. And they had a big fight with his mother-in-law between them. Apparently, they were yelling so loudly that the entire neighborhood could hear them. Years later, I learned of my mother-in-law's passing. According to attendees, the funeral was modest, and my sister-in-law had a dispute with the funeral home over the bill. It seems my mother-in-law may not have had any significant assets to leave as an inheritance. In a way, that was almost amusing. Post-divorce, I moved in with my sister and her husband. My children, who hadn't known about the divorce, were initially surprised but understood after I explained everything. Now, I work part-time, contribute to the household, and enjoy spending time with my grandchildren.